What's up, you guys? Today's video is all about how to be a healthy vegetarian. Hey guys, it's Kiran. Welcome back to my channel. I post videos every single week on the topic of health and fitness, so that includes fitness videos, nutrition, recipes, and so much more. So click that subscribe button below because I post every single week and you don't want to miss it. Alright, so let's get into today's video. So today's video is all about how to be a healthy vegetarian. Now, I've been vegetarian my entire life. I know what it's like to be an unhealthy vegetarian, and I also know what it's like to be a healthy vegetarian. So for most part of my life, I would say I was an unhealthy vegetarian. I ate the worst kinds of foods. I didn't know what I was doing. I was nutrient deficient in a lot of areas. So this is why I created this video, because ever since I started living a lifestyle of a healthy vegetarian, I noticed how my body started to change, the improvements in my mood, in my energy, and so much more. So I wanted to share this advice with you. So I wanted to create a series where I could share the same tips that I use every day so you could get educated on how to be a healthy vegetarian. Now, if you're somebody who's looking to incorporate more plant-based foods and not ready to make the switch to becoming a vegetarian, that's totally okay, because living a vegetarian or more plant-strong lifestyle can be a bit challenging if not planned correctly. As we're going to discuss in today's video, there are some key nutrients that you need to look out for. Before we go ahead and consider the key nutrients that you need to consider in your diet, I want to cover the different types of vegetarian that you could potentially be. In my eyes, I think there's 4 types of vegetarianism. So the first one is pescatarian, and that is someone who does not eat any meat products but does consume fish, milk, and eggs. The second type of vegetarian would be considered ovo-lacto-vegetarian. Ovo means egg, lacto means milk. So ovo-lacto-vegetarian or lacto-ovo-vegetarian would mean somebody who eats egg and milk products but does not consume any meat products. The third type of vegetarian is a lacto-vegetarian, which is someone who consumes milk products but does not consume any egg products. Now, I fall into the third category of lacto-vegetarian. I do not consume any eggs, but I do tend to consume them in desserts, and the reason for that is because, I personally do not like the alternatives to eggs, so I just tend to turn a blind eye to desserts, but in general, I do not consume any eggs. The fourth type of vegetarian is probably the most strict, and that would also be considered vegan, someone who does not consume any egg, any meat products, any milk products, none of that. So I was actually a vegan for 6 months, and I could not deal with not having any cheese or milk. So I went back to eating my vegetarian lifestyle, my lacto-vegetarian lifestyle, because I just could not stand the thought of not having yogurt and cheese for the rest of my life. And I personally just did not like the alternatives that were available. And making my own cheeses were a bit too tedious for me. But if that is something that you are following, honestly, I have the most respect for you if you follow a vegan lifestyle. It's really hard for me, and honestly, I have the most respect for people who are able to do that. So good for you. All right, so moving on, we have a few key nutrients that we need to consider whenever we are making the transition towards incorporating more plant-based foods, reducing that meat intake, or becoming a vegetarian. Now, I'm going to be talking specific to lacto-vegetarian, and the reason is because that's the category that I fall in, and that's where I have the most knowledge about. So the first key nutrient that you need to consider when making a switch to a more vegetarian lifestyle, or how to be a healthy vegetarian, you need to consider your protein intake. Now, I get asked this question all the time. Kiran, you're a vegetarian. Where do you get your protein from? I get enough protein. Believe me, probably more protein than most meat eaters. It's true. So the first thing you have to consider is the amount of protein that you need in your diet. Now, I follow the guideline of 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of my body weight. Now, the reason I follow that is, number 1, I'm getting older, so as you age, your protein needs increase. And number 2, Because I live an active lifestyle, I lift weights, I exercise every single day, I need to make sure that I'm getting enough protein in order to maintain my lean muscle mass and build more lean muscle. So I stick to 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of my body weight. So that puts me at roughly about 110 to 120 grams of protein a day. So the types of protein that I go for are nuts and seeds, nut butters, tofu, lentils, beans, yogurts, and cheeses. Those are the main sources of proteins that I go for. Now, if you are a lacto-ovo vegetarian, eggs would also fall into that category as a protein source, but because I don't eat eggs on a regular basis, unless it's in desserts, I tend to just stick with my other sources. I'll be going into more detail in part 2 of this series on how I get my protein intake, how I plan my meals to make sure that I get 110 to 120 grams of protein a day. So next up is iron. So the good thing about iron is that it comes in a variety of foods, legumes, nuts and seeds, and vegetables. The key thing to remember about iron is that in order for your body to absorb the iron from our foods, especially plant sources, you have to consume some vitamin C. Now, while most vegetables and fruits have vitamin C in them, in order to absorb the iron, we need to up our vitamin C intake. I've heard people recommend that you should drink a glass of orange juice with your greens or with your vegetables. That's really bad advice. And the reason is orange juice has a lot of sugar. It's pure fructose for your body. And if you know anything about insulin levels, which we're going to talk about in part 3, orange juice is not a good idea to add to your foods. Instead, opt for other fruits that are high in vitamin C, such as lemons or berries, other low glycemic fruits that are really good to incorporate into your salads or greens to get that vitamin C into your diet. Now, what I typically do is, for example, in a smoothie is I'll put in kale, spinach, I'll put some lemon, some ginger, and a couple, maybe some strawberries or blueberries, just to add that extra bit of color, and I'll consume that, and I know that I'm getting the iron from my leafy greens because I have the vitamin C. Next up, you have to consider your calcium and vitamin D intake. Now, first let's talk about vitamin D. Vitamin D, if you live in Canada like I do, chances are you're vitamin D deficient in general. And the reason is we're not getting enough sunlight in this part of the world. So definitely want to increase your intake of vitamin D through supplementation. You can find vitamin D in some dairy products, but again, it's not enough for your diet. So I would highly recommend that you supplement with the vitamin D. Calcium is probably not that hard to get into your diet. It is an essential nutrient for healthy bones and joints. You need to make sure that you're getting enough calcium in your body to reduce your risk factor of osteoporosis and osteopenia, which is very common, especially among women. So there are actually a lot of vegetarian calcium sources, such as kale, collard greens, soy nuts, and even okra. So if you are consuming those foods and you're consuming it regularly, that's great. You should be okay with your calcium intake. However, if you're not having it every single day, then I definitely recommend that you supplement. Now, I tend to not supplement with just calcium alone. And the reason is if you take calcium by itself, it may not get absorbed in your body, and in fact may just flow freely through your bloodstream and can be dangerous. You need to make sure that you're getting magnesium, vitamin K2, and vitamin D in your calcium supplement in order for your body to maximally absorb in your body. Okay, next up is vitamin B12. This is a big nutrient that's lacking in a vegetarian lifestyle. Vitamin B12 is super important in producing red blood cells, and it helps move oxygen freely through your system. So if you do not get enough vitamin B12, this can be potentially dangerous and lead to anemia. So you have to be careful of that. I used to be somebody who was low in iron, who actually was almost borderline anemic. And this was when I was living a very unhealthy vegetarian lifestyle. That means I was not caring about what nutrients I was taking into my body. And instead, I was just eating whatever I could possibly find that just didn't have meat in it. And I know that by making the switch to a more healthier lifestyle, incorporating more high protein vegetarian sources, that really helped me boost my B12 intake and boost my iron intake so that I'm no longer low in iron or anemic. So when you're deficient in B12, you can experience a lot of health issues such as fatigue, exhaustion, weakness, and even constipation. And if you're a vegetarian and vegan, you're at a higher risk of becoming deficient over time. Now, while there's a lot of seafood that is high in B12, if you're a pescatarian, you may not have to worry about that. But for someone like me who doesn't eat any fish, I would have to be highly cautious of my B12 intake. And there's a lot of packaged foods that are B12 fortified, and I try to stay away from those. And the reason is most of them are carbohydrate sources such as grains and cereals, and I just tend to not eat those kind of processed foods. Instead, certain foods like milks and yogurts have B12 in them, whereas vegans may have a harder time getting their B12. What I actually look for to ensure that I'm getting enough B12 in my diet is supplements that are high in B12. So one supplement that I particularly love to take is matcha, and in particularly Unicity matcha. And the reason I like Unicity matcha is, number one, it has B12 vitamins in it, so I'm so happy about that. Secondly, it tastes amazing. Like, it's the best matcha I've ever had, and I've tried a lot of different kinds and varieties of matcha. And then third, of course, is the electrolytes and the other added antioxidants that it provides my body. So it gives me the energy that I need throughout the day. Definitely check that out if you want some. I'll put my link in the description box below. And if you want a couple samples to try out, see if you like it before you buy it, DM me on my Instagram and I'll get you a couple samples to try out. Okay, so the last but not least essential vitamin or nutrient that you need to consider in your diet is omega-3. Now, omega-6 is very highly abundant in our diet, so I'm not talking about omega-6, I'm talking about omega-3 in particular. Over 60,000 clinical studies have been conducted on omega-3 and its benefits to human health. One thing to consider when we're looking at omega-3 is to know that there's 3 different types of omega-3: EPA, DHA, and ALA. Now, while EPA and DHA are found in mostly fish, such as salmon, it's very hard to find EPA and DHA in plant sources. In fact, the most widely abundant source of omega-3 is ALA in plant sources. Now, your body does not readily use ALA. It needs to be converted into EPA and DHA to be useful for our bodies. But this can be challenging for vegetarians or vegans who do not want to consume fish products or take an omega-3 pill. So, of the sources that are available of omega-3 in the diet for vegetarians and vegans are chia seeds, Brussels sprouts, walnuts, flax seeds, and algae. So the foods that I've listed are high in omega-3. However, most plant sources are ALA. ALA needs to convert into EPA and DHA by the body in order for your body to use it. So even though you're consuming these types of foods and think you're getting enough omega-3, you may not, because ALA only converts about 5% to EPA and 0.5% to DHA. So you may have to consume a lot of chia, a lot of flax seeds in order to meet your daily requirements. Now, I try to just keep it really simple, and I just take an omega-3. I was very resistant though, I have to say. And the reason was because I just didn't want to consume any fish products. But I started getting dry eyes. And I originally thought that my contacts were making my eyes dry, but when I switched my contacts, it didn't even resolve the problem and my eyes were still dry. And it wasn't until I started taking an omega-3 supplement that I noticed that my eyes started to get better. They started to be more moist, and I no longer am rubbing my eyes because you're dry anymore. Omega-3 is one of the most widely studied supplements that you can add to your diet. So I would highly recommend incorporating an omega-3 into your diet. Alright guys, so that concludes part 1 of this 4-part series on how to be a healthy vegetarian. Next week, we're gonna be talking about how to incorporate more protein into your diet and how I get about 110 to 120 grams of protein a day on a vegetarian diet. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and click that subscribe button below because I post videos every single week. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.